all. This evening we have a couple of presentations, and the first is to congratulate and recognize one of our graduates from our local Capitola Government Academy. So I'm going to ask Lori Hill if she'll come up to the podium.
Oh, we tried.
I could jump, but it might be better. If I don't make it,
Freezing, not graduation.
So let me just let everybody know that the Capitola Leadership Academy is a 4 sessions that local citizens participate in. They volunteer their time to come and learn about the inner workings of our local government, how the local government here through the city manager, the chief of police, also work and relate to other county government agencies, the 911, the Regional Transportation Commission, and other government bodies, the SoCal Water District. And we recently had some graduates from our program, but Lori could not be here for that graduation, so we tried to have another to recognize her and to thank her for spending the time to learn more about local government. And I know it's going to serve you well in the future. So congratulations. This is a certificate of completion that certifies that Lori Hill has successfully completed the Capitola Local Government Academy, the class of 2013-14. Congratulations, Lori.
All I want to say is thank you, Mayor, for this lovely certificate. Thank you, Council, for the support of this Leadership Academy. And Jamie, you did a great job. Lisa, wherever you are out there, it was great bringing it back, and I enjoyed meeting the other people, and you put together a fabulous program. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the introduction of a new assistant planner, Ryan Safty. Did I say that correctly? Yes. Good.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Story and Council. I've got 2 updates for you. First is the Community Development Director, Rich Gruno, has had a daughter, and they're all doing well and very happy, and he's spending time at home right now. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you tonight Ryan Safty as the new assistant planner within the Community Development Department. Ryan graduated from Cal Poly's City and Regional Planning Program with cum laude honors this past June. He interned with the City of Camarillo's Community Development Department for 2 summers before joining us. And Ryan has experience working with the public. He has experience researching land use projects and also drafting design guidelines within the Cal Poly Planning Studios. So it's my pleasure tonight to introduce you to Ryan Safty. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, so I don't know exactly how this works, but it's good to be here. I was told that there's going to be a question coming from left field my way.
Always.
Always?
That would be from over here.
Okay.
So
I am left field.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
All right.
So, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm sorry, that was a terrible thing to say to you. Why did you really like doing this?
Yeah.
You've been to a planning commission meeting already,
I have.
and you still like it.
Yes.
I love you. You're great.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank
Ryan,
you.
you're living in town, aren't you?
Yeah. Actually, it's technically right outside of Capitola. I live over by the Target shopping center, so just right on the edge.
We'll try and annex that.
all right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations, Ryan. We, as mayor, I want to welcome you to Capitola, and we look forward to working with you for many, many years to come.
Thank you.
And so congratulations on, this is your first job out of college, huh?
Yeah, just
Yeah?
graduated last year, so
Uh-huh.
this is the big one.
All right. Well, I would have to say you did really well for yourself. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
welcome to Capitola.
Yeah, I lucked
All
out.
right. Okay.
Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you.
So next we'll move on to a report on closed session from the city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor Story. We only had 2 items to discuss in closed session this evening. We had the Schrodel matter on for a status report from the city attorney to the council, and there have really been no developments in that case, so we didn't have much to report, and the council took no reportable action in closed session. The council also heard from the city manager with regard to the tort claim presented by an anonymous minor by attorney John Caniglio concerning an injury she sustained on the wharf, and we just provided you with a summary of that claim and answered questions and took no reportable action in closed session. That claim will probably be administered by the city's risk liability pool. And that's the end of my oral report.
Yeah. Thank you, John. The next on the agenda is additional materials. We have no additional materials this evening, so we will now move on to additions and deletions to the agenda. Are there any requested additions or deletions from council members? Seeing none, we'll work with the agenda that we have posted this evening. Now we move to public comments. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the council on items that are not on tonight's agenda. So if you have something, please come up to the podium and speak to us. And if you want your name in the record, please state your name and sign in, but it's not a requirement.
My name is Bob Seuss. I live in the community. My presence here tonight is to request protection of the precious scenic corridor of the Monterey Bay. I'm referring to the eyesore of these flashing fluorescent electronic signs located along Park Avenue in Capitola. I'm sure you probably have received many of these from most of my neighbors. May I give these to you, or here, right here? Okay. But here's another one to add to your file on this particular area. You probably got some of these by email. I know the police chief did. And probably from most of the people who are affected the most. But here's another one, as I stated to you. Everyone is affected by these signs. Even people who come to visit us here in Capitola. This is one of the few remaining areas to view the beautiful Monterey Bay without any buildings. And now we have these flashing electronic lights in our faces on a sign 15 feet high. 2 signs, one on each side. We understand that safety is important. However, safety could be accomplished with a crosswalk or a stop sign. It is with that in mind that we in the community, along with those who visit our beloved city, that you preserve this precious scenic corridor along Park Ave with its beautiful view, and that these fluorescent flashing electronic signs be removed or be relocated. I just had some people come down to our condominium, which is right on Park. And I didn't tell them that the sign was there, right in front of us. But they had no problem finding it, because it was right smack in the middle of our view. And so I urge you to reconsider, and I thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Seuss, for coming here and speaking to us this evening. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council? Yes.
Little change of hats. My name is Lori Hill. I'm the president of the Capitola Begonia Festival, and I am here to announce the 62nd festival is currently, the planning is currently underway with all volunteer committee working on all the various aspects. Our theme this year is Begonias on Broadway. And I want to thank the council and staff for all the support that you've given us over the many years of the festival. Many of you personally have stepped forward and done so much for the festival. The thanks is just never enough. But the festival is all about celebrating the Capitola's history, and we offer 4 family-friendly days of free activities on Labor Day weekend. It's really all about participation. You know, it's come down, help build a float, play horseshoes, come down and play with begonias, build a sand sculpture. It's all about coming down and doing, and every bit of it is free. And it also has a significant theme of cultivating our community and volunteerism. So I want to give a couple of dates for you to put on your calendars and a couple of announcements. Our call to artists is currently underway. We select an artist to produce our poster art. The art is submitted, the committee reviews the art, and a piece of art from an artist is selected. It is used for the Begonia Festival poster, and it's also used for all of the promotional materials that are associated with the Begonia Festival. That information regarding the call to artists is on our website, begoniafestival.com, and the deadline is the end of March. April 1st is Community Tuesday at Shadowbrook. Please bring your family down to the Shadowbrook. 30% of the proceeds will go directly to the Begonia Festival. Tell your waiter or waitress that you're there for the Begonia Festival. On April 12th, we will be putting on a community workshop. And the community workshop is designed to give people a little bit more information about the Begonia Festival, entice them to become volunteers, entice them to come down and participate. Maybe they want to build a float. That community workshop is going to be held at 9:30 in the morning on, again, April 12th at the Mid-County Senior Center. They're one of our new partners in doing the Begonia Festival. We need more floats, we need more volunteers, and this is a great opportunity to hear about the incentives that we offer and the opportunities. Our fundraiser is August 3rd at the Shadowbrook. Many of you have been to that fundraiser, and it's fabulous, and it's a sellout every single year. And, of course, come down Labor Day weekend for the Begonia Festival. It will be a show not to be missed. Thank you very much for the few moments at the podium. And I also want to tell you that we not only have a website, we have a Facebook now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Next, excuse me, yes.
Hi, my name is Deborah Young, and I'd also like to comment on the signage that's been placed on Park Avenue. I live at 850 Park Avenue, and in 2005, when the unit that I'm in became available, we moved down from up on the hill by 47th and Claire's into this unit solely because there was a little 45-degree view of the water. We're on the side, not on the front. And even though the building was built in the early 70s and it's in its original condition, that was the only reason to move there. So now, unfortunately, all day, every day, what I see is the flashing lights every time the cars go by, and it's right in the very center of the one window we have to look out. So I've also gone ahead and contacted 2 of my appraisers, the original one who appraised the property when I purchased, and another one who actually lives here in Capitola, and another one who appraised the property again a year and a half ago for a refinance, and she lives in Santa Cruz. Both of these people have made their living off of valuing the property we have here on the coast. And both of them had said to me that it's very reasonable that 10% of the value of the property is attributable to the view. So taking that into consideration, I hope you will. We'd really like to request that the signs be relocated to a different area on Park Avenue. Or perhaps if there's a safety issue or you're trying to slow the traffic down, you could put a stop sign in or a crosswalk. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, I was under the impression that the police chief was already working on this issue with the neighbors. Has it been resolved? Is this a resolved issue?
It's being worked on.
It's being worked on.
Process.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand that the police chief has met with some of the neighbors, and as well as the city manager. It sounds like that the issue is not yet resolved. I have also offered to meet with the neighbors to discuss the matter, and so I think that this is going to have some further discussion and seeing if we could work out a mutually acceptable resolution. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, I'm going to close the podium for public comments, and I will take us then to council treasurer staff comments. And let's start with council comments. Yes, Stephanie.
Well, as everyone has read in the paper this week, the Capitola Book Cafe is closing. So if you get a chance, go over there between now and the 28th and buy something. Let's support them. And they have some author pictures for sale, and black and white pictures. And I picked up the one that was of Huldah Hoover McLean, whose family owned Rancho del Oso up the coast and donated it to the state. And she was a grand lady who lived here in Capitola for a while, and I always kick myself for not getting to know her. She wrote a wonderful book called Almost 100 Years. She wrote it when she was almost 100, about her life, and it's fabulous. So now I have this picture of Huldah Hoover McLean at the Capitola Book Cafe at a book reading in 1993. So it's just precious. So they have some wonderful things there, or if you feel like giving them a gift, or if we all want to put a card together and give it to them, I think they would appreciate any support. When one lady asked them what was going to happen to that space, she said she thought the theater was talking to the city maybe about expanding that way. But anyway, we owe them a big debt of thanks. They've provided a huge cultural experience for us in Capitola, where we have had world-renowned authors come and read right here in Capitola, and they've provided so much to this community that I think we're all very, very thankful, and I wish them all well, and I hope that they'll move on and find other wonderful things in their life, because they've certainly been a real important part of this community for a long time.
Thank you, Stephanie. Other council members, comments? Yeah.
Just a
go ahead.
quick comment.
Yeah.
I attended a AMBAG meeting last night, which is the Monterey Bay Area government, and they're releasing their Metropolitan Transportation Plan for Sustainable Community Strategies for 55-day public comment. This is a plan to guide us through the year 2035, and they're going to be having a couple workshops that people can attend, and I just want to give the dates of those workshops. I believe one is in Watsonville on March 4th. The format will be an open house from 6 to 7 and a public hearing from 7 to 8, so it goes from pretty much 6 to 8 o'clock. And again, it's Tuesday, March 4th in Watsonville, and the other date is Thursday, March 6th in Santa Cruz, in the Santa Cruz Police Department Community Room. And the other one is the Watsonville City Council Chambers. And that's it.
Are there materials we can leave upstairs if people want to read anything, or can we get an extra copy of the report maybe?
I have a copy of this that I can leave up there. They can leave at the desk, and
I think they have copies up there now.
Okay, if not, I'll leave that for them.
Okay. Thank you, Ed. Mike?
At a Library Commission Joint Powers Board meeting on Monday, there's big changes coming in the library system and the way it's organized. And I thank our city manager, Jamie Goldstein, participating with other county leaders in fashioning a new JPA. And an interesting point was brought up in that cities take great care in keeping tobacco merchants and smoking around a certain radius around schools, and libraries are never mentioned. So I'd like to just review carefully with the staff and make sure that we include libraries when we talk about smoking and the sale of smoking products. Thank you.
Yeah. Dennis?
Just quickly, and just following up on Ed's comments there, is that I'm under the impression, Jamie, that actually there's going to be a review of that report on its as a council agenda before it's approved? Is that what the...
We're talking about the RTP?
Yes.
the Regional Transportation Plan. I know the Public Works Director has been looking over the draft RTP and taking a look to see whether or not it makes sense to have council comments submitted individually to staff, which we could forward on to the RTC and AMBAG, or whether it makes more sense to have a council discussion. I know that historically we haven't had a council review the draft document. The question in our mind is simply whether or not the level of projects warrants and level of activity in Capitola warrants consideration by the full council, or if this is something the council members could review on their own.
Okay. I'm under the impression that it's on our agenda for the RTC on March 6th, which will be the approval date of that. So we have a pretty short window here, about 3 weeks. So if anyone has comments, be sure and get them back this way so we can address those and
Yes. If it's agendized, it would be agendized for the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I wanted to take this opportunity to announce that the Capitola Soquel Chamber of Commerce and the City of Capitola is having a presentation on how Capitola can maintain its economic edge in a changing retail environment. It's being presented by David Greensfelder, and the presentation will address the following questions. One, being number one in a competitive retail environment, differences between commodity and specialty retailers, takeover of former retail space by non-retailers, and longer-term impacts of today's planning sessions. So it sounds like it's a very interesting presentation, and it's going to be held on Wednesday, February 26th, 2014, from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Here in these council chambers. It looks like it should be, for anyone who maybe wants to keep up with the retail business, it looks like a lot of helpful tips. I also wanted to let the public and the council members know, I think a couple of meetings ago, this council authorized a couple of members, myself and Dennis Norton, to meet with the Soquel School District members, a couple of them in ongoing ad hoc informal meetings to discuss issues that relate to both of us. I did want to announce that because of, and as a part of that action, they appointed Ed to be the alternate to Dennis. And it turns out that Dennis, because of his schedule, is not going to be able to attend these sessions. So I just want to let everyone know that Ed is going to step in on a regular basis with those meetings with myself, so that we can keep that dialogue going on with the school district. So yeah, there's no action needed on that. We will then move on to see if the city treasurer has any comments for us this evening.
No comments.
Thank you. Staff comments? Yeah.
Oh, I just looked at our smoking ordinance. We do prohibit smoking on the library grounds, so.
How about the radius for sale of tobacco products? I know we do it for schools.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice to add it for libraries as well.
I'll look at that. The other thing that we're starting to look at, people throughout the state, are extending the smoking regulations to apply to e-cigarettes, because technically, you know, these are tobacco and e-cigarettes are a little different. So I'm looking at that right now, and I'll be in touch with you on that as well.
Thank you, John. Jamie, did you have any comments? Okay. Next, we'll move on to item number 8, which is boards, commissions, and committee appointments. The first one is appointments to the Library Ad Hoc Committee. You know, this is a committee that we had several years ago, in which a couple of members and some citizen members sat on as we were starting to think about and design a new library for Capitola. That committee got disbanded because of its funding source, which were the redevelopment agencies. When those were terminated, we, at that point, had no reason to continue this committee. But now, you know, we have preserved some of the funding for the library, so we are reinstituting this library ad hoc committee. Maybe I'll ask staff to give a report on this, and the council can then discuss their selections.
I'm really confused on what we're selecting. What are we going to do?
Well, there is this committee of 7 members.
We're reforming it.
We're reforming the...
But I know how many. How are the selections made? How many people are we selecting? to go on this?
Councilmember Norton, I may be able to shed a little bit of
Yeah.
light on this. This is what's called an ad hoc committee, so it isn't established pursuant to any city resolution. It's simply a committee that's tasked with a specific job by the city council. It's not subject to the Brown Act, and it's intended to serve for a limited period of time. So there's no specific rules about how many members or appointments you would make to it. There's no hard and fast rules, as it were. I believe we have 4 applicants for the position. You'll recall that previously, when we had a library ad hoc committee, I think we had 2 council members, as well as I think 3 or 4 members of the public. My suggestion would be that I think that all the applicants that we've received applications for are well qualified and would be good fits for this committee. And I think if any council members were interested in serving on the group, it would make a lot of sense to have a council member or 2 sit on the body as well. I don't think that even if there were 2 council members along with the 4 members of the public, that it would be too unwieldy a size. But I think also 1 council member would be appropriate as well. So I hope that helps.
So would you like this in one motion, or what would you like to see, Mr. Mayor?
Well, why don't we begin by, seeing we have the 4 citizen applicants. Let's maybe see who, the couple of council members that may want to volunteer, and we have Michael there, and we have a lot of interest. Well, maybe we should have some discussion about who the council members may be, because I mean, we should really only have 2 so that we can maintain its status as an ad hoc committee. And so now, I mean, and I'll begin in my sense that since Mike also sits on the Library Joint Powers Board, we should certainly have him interface with this committee so that he can be maintaining connection between what's going on at the Library Joint Powers Board and this committee. And Mike was on this committee before when it was originally constituted. So we have 3 interested parties. You guys want to draw?
I sat on this committee before too. I was also along with Mike in the site selection. I sat. I was.
Just a question, did everybody raise their hand on that? I didn't.
We did, yeah.
Then I will withdraw to make it even simpler, so Stephanie and Dennis can decide who they'd like to represent.
Okay. Well, that makes it a little bit easier. And so, do you guys want to?
Well, it would depend. For me, it would depend on what time it met. I don't have very many evenings free, so noon time is perfect for me. And I looked at some of the applicants, and I think it would work with them, but it would depend on their schedule. So.
Generally, we were meeting, I think, from 3 to 5. That was our standard meeting time to sort of fit with everyone's schedule, but it's certainly wide open. It's not.
Mike, let me ask you a question. Are we set on the site? Is the site not a discussion anymore?
Well, no, the site is a discussion because at this time there's a library bond in the offing, and we would have the ability to actually build the size library that our library consultant that we paid suggested. That due to our circulation, due to the kind of traffic we have, we should have a 14,000 square foot library. And a 14,000 square foot library might not necessarily fit and be able to be staffed properly on the site we have unless we would acquire more property. So there's still site questions involved.
Okay.
But there's a larger potential pot of money than we were working with before. We were working with $2 to $2.5 million before. Now we're looking at $10 to $12 million. That's a different kind of library.
I'm willing to make a compromise with Stephanie, and basically what I'm interested in is site selection and the design. And so I would like to stay on for the first part of it, and I'll be happy to turn that position over to Stephanie, and she could be involved in the logistics of the creation of the library, if you would like to do it that way.
Sure.
Okay. And the committee has done some great work in the years that it was involved, and we had our library consultant do a master plan for us, very thorough. We also had an architectural firm that specializes in libraries do some renderings and some concept drawings. There's a lot of exciting things happening, and even our the library designer that we had, the architect, Anderson Brule, sort of leaned towards the larger one, and we sort of demurred because we had a very small pot of money, and it's a little more robust now. So yes, the site is definitely in question.
So I think Stephanie and I have an agreement, if it's okay with you.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent compromise. And maybe overall, I mean, not that you guys can maybe tag team and be alternates. If one of you can't go, then let the other, and so that we can have 2 council members at all the meetings. So maybe now we'll throw that. Yes, Stephanie.
Do we want to go to 5 members? Do we want to continue the application and try to find another 5th person, citizen, to be on
Well,
there?
we can always do that. I would make a motion to accept all 4 applications because they're all known to us. 3 of the 4 were on the committee before. We're all familiar with Dave Kramer and the work that he's done. So my motion would be to accept all 4 applications and to reopen and see if we can get 1 more.
There was an architect on us that was on this last time. Remember?
Yes.
Teal Messer.
Teal Messer.
Right.
He was a sort of an ex officio member, and he came and he gave us a lot of help. And the reason he was on our committee or sat in on the meetings was because he was designing the library for Felton.
Okay.
And Felton is also slated with the Library Bond Act to get a brand new library as well. So he is always available to us as free consulting and just good advice.
Okay, so we have a motion which also included the council member configuration that we just discussed.
I'll second that motion.
And now there's a second. Any further discussion? Before I call for the vote, any members of the public wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Which brings us now to an appointment to the Santa Cruz County Hazardous Materials Advisory Committee. And the recommendation is to consider nominating the Public Works Director, Steve Jesberg, to be the city's representative. Is there a short staff report? Or?
Council members, you'll recall that this is a position that's been vacant in the city for some time. We've been advertising it, I think, continuously for 4 to 5 months. We have not received an applicant to the position. The other cities who also make appointments to this countywide board do tend to appoint staff members as their representatives. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to find an applicant. I would sort of loathe to suggest a staff person. Nevertheless, I think the city does have a responsibility to help fill out this committee, to help ensure that they have a quorum for their meetings. Steve Jesberg is the logical choice, and we're suggesting he would meet the criteria for a committee member. They do meet during the day, so this isn't another demand on one of our directors for another night meeting.
So moved.
Second, and I'd also like to continue advertising. I mean, I think Steve would be an excellent in this position, but to take him away from his work all the time for something like this, even though it doesn't meet that often. But keep advertising and see if we can find someone.
Okay. Is that Dennis, make that part of the motion?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve the nomination of Steve Jesberg as our representative to the Santa Cruz County Hazardous Materials Advisory Commission. Is there any member of the public that would like to address us? Steve, it's your last chance to get out of this. So, no, that's the spirit. Well, hearing that, I'll bring it back. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. The motion passes unanimously. The next is a mayor's appointment to the Architectural and Site Review Committee. We had applications, 2 applications from Ellen Cooper and Craig Waltz. We had interviews that was done actually by the staff. They made a recommendation that Mr. Waltz be appointed. And my understanding, even though they're 2 excellent candidates, actually Ms. Cooper, however, because she only resides in California 6 months out of the year, she wouldn't be able to attend all the meetings. And so, therefore, the recommendation is that that I appoint Mr. Waltz, and I will hereby do so. Does council members have any comments or want to weigh in on this appointments? Seeing none, congratulate Mr. Waltz on our behalf, and we look forward to working with him, and also send our thanks to Ms. Cooper for her interest and her application. Maybe she can serve as an alternate. That brings us to the consent calendar this evening. These are items that are handled in one vote unless any one of them is pulled by council members or members of the public. Is there any member of the public that would like to pull a consent item for further discussion? Seeing none, members of the council?
I'll move the consent.
Second?
I have two polls, please.
Yes.
B and D.
So item B and item G.
And we can answer B right away if you want to take them.
Okay, sure. Why don't we go ahead and take that, Dennis, if we...
Okay. Katie? Thank you for sticking around. The McGregor property, what were the issues with the Planning Commission to continue this item?
Oh, it was a noticing issue that arose. It's in the public facilities zone as well as the visitor serving, and within the public facilities it's an allowed use, and at the time of writing the staff report I didn't catch that all allowed uses need a conditional use permit within visitor serving.
Thank you.
We're re-noticing. Thank you.
Okay, should we add item D to after item 10E?
Sure.
So there's a motion and second to approve the balance of the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously, excluding item 9D. Which brings us to our general government portion of the agenda this evening, item number 10. And this is a presentation by Kim Adamson from the Soquel Creek Water District. Welcome, Kim, and thanks for being here to give us an update on our water situation.
Thank you, Mayor Story and fellow council members. I appreciate you inviting me here tonight to talk a little bit about our water situation. I do want to recognize that I have a staff member, Melanie, with me, and then Director Bruce Daniels snuck into the back of the room as well. So since I've only been with the district 7 months, and actually in the state 7 months, they're my backup for the hard questions when we get there. I'm going to start out with just a little bit of background information on what the district is doing, what the situation we're in, and then we'll go to Q&A and probably have some more better information for you there. So start out with who we are. Soquel Creek Water District is a special district in the state of California. We are a government entity, just like the city. We do not collect taxes. We serve a population of about 38,000 people. Many of them right here in Capitola. We serve down around the bay, down to La Selva Beach. So we serve Aptos, Soquel, and all of those areas. We have approximately 50 employees, and they work around the clock to make sure that we're providing safe and adequate drinking water. And we're not, there we go. So a little bit of information on where our water comes from. We are 100% groundwater supply. Water comes from an underground aquifer, and an aquifer is basically an area of rock that has fractures in it that holds water, and it acts basically like a sponge underground. And so how that aquifer gets water is rain falls out of the sky, as you see there, and then what happens is it it percolates down into the ground and it gets into the aquifer. And when you're a coastal zone like we are, it's really important that you have high enough groundwater levels because it flows out to the sea. And fresh water is not as dense as seawater, so it has to be heavy enough to hold that seawater out. And as long as the levels are high, then we go ahead and we flow out and everything's fine, and we don't have any issues. What we do have going on in our district, though, and you're not going to see this because my video is not going to work for you here. What we do have going on in our district, though, is if my video was working, you would see that we're pumping down the groundwater levels. And as you pump that down, there's not enough fresh water to hold out that seawater. So what you end up with is a wedge, and that seawater ends up, as the groundwater drops, it ends up pushing inland. And on Monterey Bay, further down the bay, there are areas where seawater has pushed 12 miles inland. We have seawater intrusion in our district in the La Selva Beach area, and we also have it, the city has it actually, in one of their monitoring wells in the Pleasure Point area. So we basically have it on both ends of our district. Someplace in the bay is that seawater, is that saltwater interface. We don't know exactly where it is. It could be right offshore. It could be a ways offshore. We don't know. We're working on trying to figure that out. Once that seawater does reach the shore and gets to your wells are contaminated. You can no longer use them for drinking or even for irrigation. This is a picture of the seawater intrusion I mentioned to the south of us, or maybe it's east of us. I don't know directions here very well yet. This is down towards the Salinas area, and this shows the migration of seawater intrusion at that end of the bay starting in 1944. That's the darker green piece that you see there. And in 2011, you'll see that they were about 12 miles inland, and it just continually progressed. And that's the result of continuing pumping of those aquifers, allowing that seawater to just flow further and further in. This is the Pajaro Valley, and we have the same issue there. This is also a time-lapse picture that shows seawater intrusion from around 1951. That's the yellow, up to the most recent, which is 2005. That's the dark brown that you see inland. And you'll see that it's kind of at an angle. And there's a star up by La Selva Beach. That's the bottom of our district. So there's clearly seawater intrusion, and it runs up to the bottom of our district, and we do have it in a couple of our wells. Not in our production wells, but in our monitoring wells. This shows the seawater intrusion where we found it. We maintain a network of over 75 monitoring wells. We monitor those wells for levels of chloride, which are indicators of salt water. We also monitor them for groundwater levels, so we can determine if the basin is dropping. And what you see on this slide here, the larger red and larger yellow dots are seawater intruded monitoring wells. And the green ones that are along the coast, they are currently okay. They're not showing signs of that. But what we don't know is that interface here? Is it here? Or is it here? Because it makes a huge difference how soon we have, and we don't know how soon we have. So we have to assume that it could be right there. Now, I said that the groundwater has to be high enough at the coast to hold the seawater out because of the difference in density. It actually has to be above sea level in order to hold that water out. And what you see here is a map of our groundwater levels that we've determined from our monitoring wells. And the areas that are pink are areas that are below sea level. And if you look at the small circle towards the middle there, that's actually out Main Street near Bargetto Winery, 16 feet below sea level at that point. So a large portion of our district is below sea level at the coast. Once that seawater gets there, there's nothing to hold it back. You're basically seeing almost like a large china cup. So once it's there, there's nothing to stop it from coming in. So what's the district been doing about this? the district has been working on this issue for quite some time. In 1999, they convened a public advisory committee with 20 individuals that represented private well pumpers, district customers, businesses, environmental groups, government regulators as well. And they went through a process similar to what the city of Santa Cruz is going through right now, where they went through, identified the problem, looked at possible solutions, and came out with some recommendations. What they came out with those recommendations, they recommended 3 things. They recommended possible desalination, possible recycled water, and a diversion on Soquel Creek, which at a later date actually was taken off the table because of some issues with trying to do a diversion here. And we're also learning that we have other options for reservoirs. So in 2006, we updated that information. Those 3 items still were maintained as the recommendations. And then in 2012, we updated one more time, and one of the things we saw in 2012 is that our projections for where we thought we would be for current consumption are much higher, because we've had a very robust conservation program we put in place when we knew this was becoming an issue, and we see the results of that. And so we were able to lower our goals for our annual pumping. What you see here is at the top of this graph, around 6,000 acre feet is where we thought we would be. And due to our conservation program and somewhat to the downturn in the economy, that has slowed things down a bit, we are actually at a much lower level. You'll see we're at around the 4,000 acre foot per year. This last year we pumped 4,300 acre feet per year. That's great, but we still need to do more. We expect to be able to achieve 10 to 15% more savings through conservation and through through definite rationing, because the board has already determined that we're going to go into phase 1 of some type of rationing program. Our scientists have determined that we can actually pump much less than what we have, what our demand is. Probably about 35% less. So what we have is, we have a water shortage of 1,360 acre feet per year. We can safely pump 2,900 acre feet per year during the period that we allow the basin to recover. That'll give the basin the ability to recharge, build back up to a level that can put us back in normal pumping, and we'll be able to pump about 4,000 acre feet per year. That will take at least 20 years. It could take longer. We don't know what the impacts of climate change will have on that, possible seawater rise. So we are thinking 35% we have to conserve or cut our pumping by 35% for 20 years, but it could be 23. Could be, it's a guess at this point. We know at least 20 though. So one of the real challenges with this, we know that we have to reduce our pumping in order to restore the basin, but we pump about 50% of the water that comes out of the basin right now. The rest of the water that comes out is pumped by private well owners, by small municipal water suppliers, Central Water District, and the City of Santa Cruz. There are some larger commercial pumpers, the golf course, Cabrillo College. And some of the challenges are that the people that have those wells have the right to pump the water that's under their property. California water law says that you have a right to beneficial use of the water under your property. The only time that is not the case is if a basin has been adjudicated and they've came through and determined you get this much, you get this much. The interesting thing about that is that municipal water suppliers like us or like Central, we are allowed to have the right to use anything that's surplus. So in an overdrafted basin, we're allowed the surplus. And clearly there is no surplus at this point. So what we're doing right now, I'm sure everybody's very familiar with the fact that we were moving towards a joint desalination plant with the City of Santa Cruz. It made financial sense. It made sense in that it was the most timely option for us. But that has been put on hold because the city is going through their own community investigatory process. So while they're doing that, we are looking at our backup options. Should we not move forward with that project, our options are we need to either conserve 35%, and in doing that, I will share with you that in the last decade, the district has already cut their pumping by 25%. So we're actually looking at a huge conservation if you add those two together. We've already got a lot of the fat out. So that becomes very, very difficult when you think about trying to conserve an additional 35%. Major impacts in lifestyle, major impacts on businesses. The other option is to stop pumping and bring in another water source to make up that 35% and allow the basin to rest. That's what we're focusing on right now. We're going through some exploratory meetings, and we're looking at backup options. We did at one meeting in October, we looked at in-district desal and also the deepwater desal plant that is being considered for the Moss Landing area. We are still looking at both of those options. In November, we looked at surface water options, including water transfers from the San Lorenzo River. That would be done in conjunction with the city of Santa Cruz and probably Scotts Valley. John Ricker from the county put together a very good conjunctive use study, and there's some information, and it doesn't quite meet our needs, and it is very, very expensive. And the really important thing to remember about it is it's available to us when there's excess water, and this is a good example of why it's not exactly something we can rely on. There wouldn't be any excess water this year or last year. Possibly next year. So we also had presentations by a couple of community members who have been very active in the conversation about water. We allowed them to come and present their ideas to us and look at those as well. We just had this room, standing room only, for a meeting on recycled water that went very, very well. We were focusing on in-district possibilities for recycled water. We looked at the possibility of taking recycled water and injecting it along the coast to build up a barrier to hold the seawater out. We also looked at taking it to irrigate some of the large irrigated areas along the way using the rail trail. And then also another option is to take recycled water and basically inject it in the ground to do recharge. And that's a possibility that we're continuing to look at. In March, we will again be in this room, and I do have to compliment you on your nice, quiet meeting, because when we're in here, this place is packed. So it's nice to be in here when there's only a few people. But in March, we're going to be talking about the private well issue, and we're going to be looking at a private well stakeholder group that we're convening with Central Water District and the county. The goal there is to try to get the private well owners to the table so we can build a shared understanding of what our problem is, because it's not just our problem, it's not just our wells that are threatened. We want to be able to have everyone sit around the table and understand that saltwater intrusion will happen in their wells, that groundwater levels will drop in their wells, and we have to look just to the south of us to Paso Robles to see what happens when that happens. We will be talking about replenishment districts, which are something that, similar to the Pajaro Groundwater Management Agency. It is an overlying district. It can be formed either through a JPA, which already exists with us in Central and possibly the county at a later date. We could form something through that, or it could also be formed through a petition method by citizen activists if they wanted to move forward with something like that, and there has been some push for that. But basically what it does is it has the power to either build projects to replenish the district. It has the power to monitor what people are pumping and charge them based on how much they're taking out of the district, or taking out of the basin, excuse me. And so that would help us bring everybody to the table and be responsible for the solution, rather than having the district who pumps half the water out of the basin foot the bill for 100% of whatever the solution is. And then we're also going to have a primer on California water law, because, as I mentioned, there are some things about California water law that make this a very unique situation and a very difficult situation to deal with when you're a municipal district. California is one of 2 states in the entire country, the other being Texas, that does not regulate groundwater other than through adjudication. The board has already voted to implement phase 1 of what we call mandatory rationing, and that word will change because it's not really a rationing program at this point. Phase 1 is meant to really give a push to our conservation, because we don't know how long it'll take us to get to some type of a supplemental supply solution, if we get to one at all. And so right now we are kind of restructuring phase 1. There has been a rationing plan at the district for the last couple of years, and we decided that we wanted to really make some changes, and we totally changed the philosophy of it. And so we're basically redoing that right now, and we're going to be bringing that back April 1st. We plan on having things that we can roll out immediately from that. The board has not heard what we're looking at yet, other than a little bit here and there, but they will be seeing their first taste of it at our meeting next week on Tuesday. We're going to be focusing heavily on trying to do away with the outdoor irrigation. That's going to be our primary goal, is to hit outdoor irrigation pretty hard. Get people to change out their lawns, get people to put in drought-tolerant plants. We're looking at probably water budgets for residential customers. That's easily done because you can determine an amount per person that you can use. Not as easily done in businesses, so we're trying to come up with a way that would be fair and equitable, and at this point would not stymie business growth. So we're looking at the possibility of mandatory water audits, where we go in and we identify whether they have low flow fixtures, and if they don't, they have a certain period of time to change them out, and if they don't do that, then they start getting hit with surcharges. We also would be asking them to commit to best practices that have been identified for their type of business. If we do not end up with a supplemental supply and we are in mandatory rationing phase 1, our only option is to move to phase 2 and phase 3, which in that case, everything gets a little bit more difficult up until we're saving that 35% for 20 years. And I will share with you, there have been studies done on the economic impacts to businesses about how curtailments work or affect them. And usually up until about 15%, things are pretty good. They can absorb the difference, or they can absorb the changes. But once you hit that 15% point, the losses in payroll dollars and the losses in efficiencies and output grow rapidly. So that's something that we're really going to have to consider as we move forward. But if we have no option, it's not going to be something that's voluntary. And that's all I really wanted to cover for you tonight. I wanted to leave time for Q&A because I'm sure you have questions about what the district's doing, and be happy to answer them. And of course, I have my backup here too when I can't answer them.
Thank you, Kim. Other questions? Yeah, Stephanie.
I just wanted to congratulate the board for an excellent choice for your executive director. I watched the meeting on television. I was so impressed. Good questions, good answers, good information. You know, we all should be here or watching on television and following these issues and doing everything we can. Who was it that gave us a presentation and I asked if they had low-flow toilets? Oh, no, we can't afford it. Was that the library director? Or who was that? Not too long ago. Jamie, do you remember who it was? Was it library director?
Or school?
And I mean, we have one library, we have one school.
The library.
I mean, those should be things that we did a long time ago. And I'm just still shocked that these institutions are not getting with the program. So, you know, whatever we can do to help write letters to these boards, agencies, put some pressure on them to try to find the money, because it seemed like it wasn't a huge ticket item, and it's just part of what should be the plan today in 2014 here in Capitola.
Yeah.
There are 3 schools on the water district's water, by the way.
Dennis?
Thanks for joining us tonight, Kim.
Thank you.
I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I know you're new to this position. I realize this is everybody's problem. It's not just the water district's problem. It's all of ours. It's a resource that we survive on. We need to live. If you start, let's say you started in 1999 and studying this, the population of Capitola in 1990 is exactly the same as it is today. We had no population increase. In fact, our efficiency rating within the city may have gone up 15-20% compared to 1999. So as a community, we're really drawing less from the groundwater basin. The county's seen some growth around us, which is in your district also. But the majority of it, your district, let's say a good percentage is in Capitola or this area here. So we really haven't seen. So are you telling us that the demand has been overdrawing the aquifer for many years before 1999, and we just found that out? Is that what the issue is?
Not that we just found that out. We did find it out a few years ago. We had original estimates that came from, I believe, Bruce, USGS?
Well, originally there was an estimate from USGS, very similar to the estimate we have now. And in between, the previous board went out and hired someone to give them a much higher number. It actually started in 1981. That's when we started in deficit. So at that time, we started pumping more water out of the ground than soaks in each year, and that's been going on for 30 years. Now, when this current board started, we thought, well, we're looking for a supplemental supply. We think we can get one. Let's not do a moratorium and stop business growth and so forth. Let's allow them to borrow water, and then we'll replace that when we get a supplemental supply. But as you read the newspaper, our supplemental supply project, which we've been working on for 8-10 years, has gone literally down the toilet, one might say. And so we're in a bad situation right now. We don't really have an alternate supply. And over those years, our deficit, our cumulative deficit is 22,000 acre-feet over those 30 years.
Okay. Let me read something, you come in and you respond to this, okay? The district needs to reduce the overall groundwater pumping by 35% for at least 20 years to allow the basin to fill back up again. Is that statement catastrophic? I mean, are we in a situation where we're talking this type of future rationing for a 20-year period without an alternative source of water here? Is that what we're looking at? Are we talking about the possibility of a moratorium within this county for a 20-year period while we find another source? Is that what we're up against?
Yes. Yeah, that is what we're up against. If there is not a supplemental supply, we have to reduce pumping by 35% regardless, whether we have it to make up from someplace else or whether we have to just use 35% less water. And like I said, keeping in mind that over the last decade, we've already reduced our pumping by 25%.
This is a huge community problem. 20% of your workforce out there is related to the construction business. I mean, it's a huge economic problem for this county, as well as just having the source of water. And I just go back, it seems to me that we should have been, and I know that Bruce came in on the board about 99 and the whole mechanism of the water board changed at that time. But before that, there was a problem developing and we did nothing about it. And we're waiting till we kind of wait till the point where all of a sudden we have a catastrophic statement here before we take drastic steps, and not being able to be climatologists and read when we're going to have droughts in a 3-year or 4-year period. But if this is a 20 or 30-year problem, it's a huge problem for our community.
It is a huge problem, and I will say that prior to the change in numbers, they did have hydrologists telling them you can safely pump 4,000 acre-feet per year, and we were pretty close to that. So the board, my assumption, of course I wasn't here, but the board, if they're like any other board that I've ever worked for, would have said, okay, so we got to watch it, but we're okay. Until the new hydrologist said, hey, that's about twice as much as you really have to pump. So that's when when all the warning bells went off and it was time to really, it was, oh my God, what are we going to do? So then you had to really identify and start moving forward. And the district has been working on the identified and recommended project that came out of the public process for approximately 10 years now.
Okay. I have one more question, I'm sorry. The deepwater desal at Moss Landing, is that a possibility? Is that something that's actively being pursued?
It's something we are monitoring. I will tell you personally that there are a lot of moving pieces to that project, and there are a lot of areas of concern. One of my main areas of concern when we looked at it and when I met with them, I said they're looking at a whole mirage of different businesses down there that basically support each other. And their idea is they build a data farm, a server farm, and they bring in the seawater to cool it, which is great. It's great theory because it brings up the temperature of the seawater, which makes it cheaper to do desal. But they were basically saying, government entities, you come in, you fund building a desal plant, you won't own the intake or the outfall. And to me, I said, no, I don't think so, because a desal plant is no good at all if you can't take water out of the ocean or put it back in. So there are some major issues there, and we're looking very closely at their finances, which seem to be very interesting. Let's say that. And questionable. I have not got deep enough to say that they have done anything wrong, but they are definitely not using conservative numbers on their finance side.
Thank you, Kim.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Stephanie.
There was a water group that met in the 80s from the water districts in the county and the cities, because I sat on it for a number of years, and they had just done the infamous Scalmanini report. And one of the things that we were trying to work on, some of us, was how can we work together and how can we look at this issue for the future and so forth. And I had gotten all the copies of all the well ordinances for all the cities in the county and realized that there's no regulation in there. At that time, there was no interest in regulating them, no political will at all to do that. And so, this train was coming down the track, and some people just wanted to look the other way. And Bruce now and his group have come in and, handed a real difficult problem, and I really admire all of them for trying to lead us into something that we can all live with. And I know that the idea of moratorium was not very popular, but it's got to be one of the things on the table, along with everything else to look at for this. And anything the city can do to help, not really with rebates, but if we can find a little money in our budget in next June for drought-tolerant plants or whatever, and have a free plant giveaway, spend a few $1,000s and, have something fun like a drought-tolerant plant giveaway from the city of Capitola or something positive like that would be kind of fun to do, and just to keep it in everybody's mind that we're all part of this and wouldn't have to cost a lot, but might be fun.
The district is really working hard at reaching out and working with our partners. We're doing a lot of things with other districts, other water districts, other water purveyors, and also with the cities. So we would be happy to do something with you along that line and get you involved in some of the stuff we're doing too. It would be great.
Yeah, Ed.
I had a couple questions, yeah. Kim, thanks for coming in. Bruce, thanks for joining along. Two quick questions. One is, when you were giving your presentation, you mentioned, I thought I heard you say, we have another source for reservoirs. You said something along.
We have, yeah, yes and no. We need water to. Reservoir is only as good as the water you can put into it. The idea used to be, when you wanted a reservoir, you'd go someplace up in the hill, you would build a dam, you would divert water, you'd fill up this big hole in the ground. We have a much larger reservoir right under our feet, and the state is even, across the state, we're all starting to look and say, we can hold a lot of water in this big void where our groundwater levels are dropping. We just need to get it there. So that's the reservoir. That doesn't pose a seismic issue. You're not going to have an earthquake. You're not going to have a dam go and flood everybody out under you. And it holds much, much more water than any reservoir that we could build upstream.
I'm going to go two more because it just, on it. You were doing some testing with recharge in the aquifer. How was that working out?
I'm going to defer to Bruce on that.
There's a test case going on actually near our well in Polo Grounds. We have a new well we've installed there with the county's help, and the county is doing a recharge test there. One of the things that we don't know, there's lots of recharge areas up in the mountains. Here, when you get on the flat plain, it turns out some of the rock layers are pretty tough to get through, so you can put the water on the ground and it goes into the soil, but it doesn't get any further. It actually ends up probably going into the streams, and so part of that test is to see, can we actually get some of the water to go down into the actual ground? And we don't know
Thanks.
yet.
And the last question, there was a recent article in the paper, just concerns about this hexavalent chromium, and how is that going to affect what's going on, and is that a byproduct of us drawing wells down, or just give a little insight on that?
The hex chrome that we have in the district is naturally occurring. It's the same thing as having naturally occurring arsenic in your water. That's a natural, something natural that leaches out of particular minerals underground. So we have naturally occurring hex chrome. We have one well that we've taken offline. It has some pretty high levels of it. We have a couple wells that are right at what is proposed to be the MCL, the maximum contaminant level, and we expect to see that maximum contaminant level set probably in April of this year. We have actually been working on testing treatment for, it started in beginning of 2012, I believe, partnered with UC Davis and with an engineering firm to test different methods of treatment. And we're actually taking that the next step. We're working with a company out of the UK, and they are bringing over some full-size treatment skids for us to use for the next year, and we're partnering with East Bay Med now to work on how do you get rid of the brine that comes out of this treatment process. But it is, it's one of the things that we have under control, but it is a big deal. It's a third of our water supply. So while we're dealing with all this other stuff that makes Chrome 6 look like it's little, it's not. And it is all of the water suppliers on this end of the county. Watsonville, 80% of their water supply has too high of levels of hex chrome, and Central has some as well.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mike.
First of all, a couple of kudos for you. I made a 11th hour request of your staff for some information, and they pushed it to me brilliantly and quickly.
Right.
Secondly, because of that, the other kudo is 20 years ago, we were pumping 300 million gallons more than we're pumping today. That's remarkable. And that speaks to a lot of misconceptions in the public's mind. They say, well, we're just pumping more water because there's too many people and they keep on coming. You've done an amazing job of bringing the water down, the amount pumped. Another misconception that I keep on hearing, and you hear it too, we have 3 or 4 good years of rain. Everybody goes, well, that darn water district is still talking about not having water. If you look at the rainfall over the last 20 or 30 years from NOAA, and you take any 5-year period and average it, it comes out almost the same. 17, 18, 19 inches, what we like to see, which tells me that there's a structural problem in that it's not all about rain. It's all about how much of the rain gets into the aquifer. And as Bruce said, because of the rock formations, a lot of the rain hits that rock and out to the ocean or into the stream. So I guess my question is, where do we go from here? Because even if we recharge the aquifer, we're still deficit spending. And what can Capitola do with regard to building regulations primarily? I mean, should we be looking at just not allowing sprinklers on any construction projects? Should we be looking at gray water systems, rainwater retention? There are a lot of things that can be done. I mean, even lower flow rate toilets, because there are lower flow rates than we have as our standard, and they're very functional. There's a lot of self-contained systems that take the gray water from the lavatory, the sink in a bathroom, and use it to flush the toilet directly. They're brilliant, they're beautiful, And people will be surprised if you tell them exactly how much of the water we use literally goes down the toilet. Stunning. So my question for you is, how can we as a city perhaps, in addition to doing things like Stephanie suggested, which are great, the drought-tolerant plant giveaway, how can we tune up our building regulations to help move this along? Because it's going to be hammer and tongs. Now, I don't want to see a moratorium anywhere any more than anyone else in the city or the water district wants to see it. But there are ways that we can be smarter about this. Suggestions?
A couple things that I would suggest is just working with my conservation staff. I have a brilliant conservation department, and they have ideas like you wouldn't believe, and they would be happy to sit down and say, why don't you look at this? Gray water, absolutely gray water. One thing I will caution you, being someplace where most of the water suppliers don't do sewer also. I came from a water sewer district, and as we conserve and as we put less down the sewer lines, we do create problems at some point for sewer too. So you have to have enough water down those lines to keep things moving, otherwise you get a real mess. So I think definitely working with Ron, we're going to be actually coming to you for some help with some enforcement. We don't have police powers at the district, and we're going to want to work with people, but we're also going to say, you know, you need to do some things, like you need to change out these fixtures to these low-flow fixtures, and you have a certain period of time to do it, and we'll help you do it with rebates. And please tell everybody, all of your citizens, about our rebate program, because we've got a really great rebate program. But we're going to be coming to you and asking you probably, can you help us with the enforcement part? Can you adopt our ordinance and then give us police, and then assign enforcement back to us? So that would give us the ability to really work with some of your citizens on some of these things too.
Chances are we're not going to be giving you police powers anytime in the near future.
Not police powers,
or the distant future.
Enforcement.
I'm talking about, you know, we need to make it so that anything that's done, and construction is always going on, remodels are always going on.
Yep.
We have the ability to make things better.
Yep.
And that's where I'd like to see us put some effort.
Yeah, Stephanie?
One of their staff people also that I met with last year said that we should think about diverting the shower water down at the beach to use to irrigate Lawn Way or other landscaping areas, that all that water is just, and I don't know how much that is. We've never really looked at it.
It's a big subject at the district, actually. We talk a lot about the showers at the beach. So, coming up with some plan to do something with that. But keep in mind that there are two sides of this. There's the side where you help people do better and you build better, but there's also the side, 10% of our customers use 25% of our water. So there's the side that you're not going to get to just by going out and saying, hey, we'll give you a rebate for this. They're going to end up needing to, we're going to have to be able to fine them for water waste if they're irrigating and there's a stream of water running down the street. So that's what I was talking about, coming to you for help with enforcement. So there are two pieces of it, and yeah, the showers, we would love to work with you on the showers and come up with a solution for that.
Yeah, Dennis.
You know, the good thing is that you have a running record of every individual house and how much water they use. Is that correct? You have that. So,
yes.
So, you know, one way to control waste sometimes is to take a step farther and make it, and you have done this to a certain point, is to make it financially difficult. Let's say if you come to a higher water usage. So that would be a consideration, is that you have those high users. If you're hit heavy in your pocketbook, you're more than likely going to make changes over a period of time. You're not going to absorb that kind of thing. And you know, that's something personally. I of course I'm a low user, but I would say that I shouldn't have to go to a rationing point that everybody else does who doesn't conserve. So
You might think that, but 0.5% of our customers pay $500 every month for their water bills.
Wow.
0.1% pay $1,000 a month for their water bills.
You're kidding.
And
Is
they
it
just keep doing
commercial, Bruce? Commercial? These are residential?
No, these are residential.
Right?
So there's some people that have large lots, and they have green, and they want to keep it that way, and that's part of the problem. In fact, we've estimated that our winter use and our summer use is double. So, and the winter use is pretty much all indoors, which means they use as much outdoors in the summer as they use all indoors. So 30% of our water supply goes for outdoor irrigation.
Make it expensive, Bruce.
If we could solve that one problem, we would have practically our 35%.
Yeah. Mike?
One other thing I want to share about tiered rates and making it more expensive, and that is that's like the foundation for conservation, is you use tiered rates, and the more you use, the more you pay. Welcome to California. We have Prop 218, and it says that we can't charge more for water than what it costs us to deliver it. So what we can do is we can structure our rates so our lowest users pay little, but then you run into the issue of having to operate, which is what is basically a business, because we don't have any tax dollars coming in. And if tiered rates are successful and those top users quit using all the water that they're paying for, then all of a sudden we're at a huge deficit for revenue, and we still have all the bills we have to pay. So we're trying to balance this. We're looking actually less at tiered rates because of the requirement to have it tied to our cost to deliver. We're looking more at surcharges or fines, and here's your water budget, and if you go over it this month, you're going to be charged 2 times your monthly water bill. Something like that we can do, and we don't have to we can do it out from under Prop 218, but we can't do it. We'd have to have you do it and give it back to us. So but that's something that we may come and talk to you about.
For a small fee, we might be willing to do that for you. I'm only kidding. I've read some reports where, not unlike electrical usage, that if water usage is able to be monitored from inside the home, people tend to save more. And I know that you have pretty much changed over to RF meter reading, and I think that there are things that we can pursue to give people an indicator inside their home on where they are at any given moment throughout the month or the year. And I think just that, psychological recognition of what they're using pays off. And you've probably read the same reports about people metered and non-metered, and knowing what they're using at any time does pay off. So that may be something we could pursue as well. But you guys do a great job, and we have the best water district anywhere. And that's the truth.
Right. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions from council members? Excellent discussion. I just wanted to give the members of the public, is there anyone that would like to speak on this topic this evening?
Oh.
Yes, Bruce.
I can't let this go without talking about climate a little bit. All of our estimates, the 20 years, 35%, is based on, the rainfall keeping up the way it has been. And all you have to do is look back at this past year to see something strange has happened. We got virtually no rainfall in 2013, and that's kind of unheard of. In fact, someone who studies tree rings and so forth says that this will probably be the most intense drought since the year 1580, which is 150 years before George Washington, to give you a concept of that. And so we may be going back in time when there were droughts that lasted 100 or 200 years, and I hope we don't get there, but even if we don't, things are going to get worse. And that means that you kind of have to run real fast just to stay where you are. As an example, the prediction is we'll have about ½ an inch of sea level rise every year between now and the end of the century. And that means our groundwater levels have to go up the same ½ an inch just to maintain the difference. And that's not getting us ahead, that's just maintaining. So we have to work hard. The prediction is that by the end of the century, groundwater recharge will automatically be reduced by 30%. So again, we're facing that kind of a change. And I know you get some of your water from the city of Santa Cruz, and things are not rosy there either. Their EIR estimates were based on looking back at the last century and seeing how things were. And of course, the worst drought in the last century was the '77 drought, and they predicted 29% cutback if that were to happen again. And since it happened once in the last 100 years, they were estimating it was going to happen once in the next 100 years. Of course, this year is exactly that. The prediction by the Department of Water Resources is that by mid-century, that kind of drought will happen every 6 to 8 years. By the end of the century, that kind of drought will happen every 3 or 4 years. And of course, they have no more water supply than we do in droughts. So The situation all over the county is tough when you really sit down and look at it, both us and the city.
I just wanted to bring up one other
Yeah,
issue.
oh.
Many years ago, when Soquel Creek was really, really low, at one time, we thought the water district's taking water out of the creek. So we brought it up, and they did a study, and they looked at it, and they said, we're not taking any water out of flowing Soquel Creek. You know, but there's other people that are doing it up above, all the way up. And I know that's not really your department or really ours, it's the county's, because it's a county resource. But I'd love to have somebody look at that sometime and look at the people, all the people that are pumping water out of Soquel Creek and we talked about having a water master, getting it adjudicated and getting the people that did have rights, you know, the ability to continue, but people that were doing it illegally, it's not going to give you any more water, it'll give the riparian corridor more water and the fish and the wildlife and so forth, which would be better for us on the long run. So it is, you know, it's something we still should be interested in.
And it's true that the district doesn't take any water directly out of the creek. We, of course, pump the groundwater, which is kind of connected to surface water. But the entire creek has been adjudicated. So in theory, you can go and look and see what everyone up and down the creek has a right to. And some people, it's known, don't have a right to it, and they still throw a hose in the creek and pump the water out. And you're right, it has no water master, so even if you don't even know who to report it to, because there's no one to go and tell them to stop. So it is a problem. And again, as climate change, I mean, go out and look at the creek right now, see how low it is after those big rains we had. And
So that might be something for us to look into at some point about how we would legally hire a water master, somehow jointly with the county, I suppose, and try to get that to happen, because that's been a topic we've talked about for a long time. And I remember we had a presentation about that before, and I don't know the details about it, but I'd love to look at that.
Okay.
Bruce, do we still have any private wells in Capitola city limits?
oh yeah, sure we do. There was a MTBE spill at the Quick Stop Market on Soquel Drive. It's not in Capitola, but there was a spill there, and since I was on the Regional Water Quality Control Board at the time, I went walking in the neighborhood, and I was flabbergasted. Like every third home had a private well in the backyard.
Which neighborhood?
The Quick Stop Market on Soquel Drive.
Past the farm.
It's in Soquel. It's
Oh,
before you
okay,
get to
in
Park.
Soquel. In
Before you get to
Soquel.
Park. And folks had wells in the backyard. Some of them didn't use them, but they kept them because they thought, well, we might want to use it for irrigation, or we're not sure what, but you know, they had them. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some private wells here in Capitola too.
The Rispin had one, but we closed that down.
Yes, but
The,
you never really tell. It's just some little bump in the backyard, and that's
No.
where the well.
But you know, that's because this area was all agriculture. It was all flowers and orchards. And, you know, Dick Nutter said he raised cattle, I think, from Soquel to Capitola. They ran cattle there on their farm or ranch.
Right.
So it's fun to look at those old pictures.
Thank you.
Any other
Thank you, Bruce.
comments from council members? Any other comments from members of the public? Seeing none, I want to, Kim, thank you very much for being here, all your staff. Thank you for the work that you do. And hopefully this is just the beginning of coordinated action on the part of the Water District and the City of Capitola to help address this very sobering issue that we're facing. So thank you, Bruce, for being here this evening.
Thanks for having us, and hopefully we can come back and give regular updates on what we're doing. So
That would be very nice. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. I will now move us to item B, which is to consider an ordinance amending section 10.04.010 and adding section 10.32.030 to the Capitola Municipal Code pertaining to vehicles and traffic. Staff report. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council Member. Rudy Escalante, your Chief of Police. What you have in front of you today is a proposal regarding an amendment and an addition to our municipal code regarding pedestrian and vehicle traffic. What we've kind of looked at over the last 6 months to a year was there were a lot of additional signage of people, the mobile signs where people stand and wave signs trying to get people into their businesses, and a couple of occasions we'd seen where people had gone into the center medians to try and attract more visibility as to what their business was. We've also seen where people would congregate in the middle of the center dividers. And what we found is that there are times where we've had accidents where cars have gone astray, some of them have been distracted. At times there's been a DUI driver where they've actually jumped the curb and they've either hit a tree or they've hit a sign. And as we went along the way, trying to figure out how we can minimize that problem, we worked with some of those people who were waving the signs, keeping them on the sidewalk where it's a much more safer place to be. So we were looking at ways that we could not only work with them, communicating with them what the problem was, but also from an ordinance standpoint, what we could utilize if we needed to do any type of enforcement effort. And so what we have is an introduction of this ordinance to try and increase these traffic safety concerns that we've identified and keep people off of those center medians, because there's just no way to protect the public if they are there. And we have added certain exceptions to the ordinance so that if we are doing construction or we have to do maintenance or have a contractor or public works crews are working in those center dividers, they would be exempt from this particular ordinance. And so we don't have anything in the California Vehicle Code that we could utilize to keep people off of those center medians, and we feel that this would be a good approach to keeping people from being in that center divider and then protecting them as they are crossing the streets. And so with that, I'm available to take questions.
Questions from council members? Just one clarification, Chief. This ordinance in no way, I mean, if there are folks that are standing on the sidewalks soliciting.
It does not pertain to the sidewalks.
Okay. Yeah. John, are there any First Amendment rights that folks have to be able to do that? And
well, there are cases that talk about, panhandling is a form of speech, but you always have the ability to regulate time, place, and manner. And as long as there are alternative opportunities for people to do that, then you're not creating an actionable infringement on their First Amendment rights.
Okay, thank you. If there are no questions from council members, I'll open it up and see if there's any member of the public that would like to address the council on this item. Seeing none, I'll close the
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve staff recommendation. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We'll move on now to item C, 10C, which is to consider the McGregor Park sponsorship program. Lisa, you're going to lead us in this?
You want to spot since yours is up? And
I can run it for you if I can.
Use that? Okay. Yeah. A little technical difficulty.
Oh, we are having technical difficulty.
There you go. I'm not quite as technically savvy as the city manager. That's why he's where he's at, and I'm where I am. Okay, good evening, council. Ooh, put this in the... All right. Tonight I'm here before you to talk about a possible sponsorship park donation program for the McGregor Park recreational facility, where we'll have a multi-use temporary skate park, dog park, and bike park. And as you recall, at the last time in January when we met and you authorized the project to go forward, approved the appropriations for the infrastructure, which would be fencing, parking, water, restrooms, pathways, landscaping, and asphalt. Although for the elements of each individual usage, the staff had said, the council, to seek outside funding sources for each element through sponsorships and donation. And actually, we've had quite a few people who've come forward, and so, in their interest in how can we sponsor. So we needed to put together a framework of how we can accept those donations and what would those interested folks and businesses would receive in return for their sponsorships and what type of recognition. So what I've done is put together a very draft sort of outline of a potential plan utilizing other agencies' programs. I took a look around and contacted some other places, and they gave me some basic framework structure, which I put together for you. Each element of the park I structured differently because each one has significantly different costs associated with it. So, for example, the skate park is much different in its cost to build than, say, the dog park. So recognizing those differences, that's how I came up with the idea of the different levels for each one. And so I think the best to go about this is as sort of a framework for the discussion, and then we can refine it here with your input and get a little more detailed of a plan. With regards, so I'll hit the skate park first and go through each one of sort of the idea. Again, keeping in mind because it is a temporary location, that how would we acknowledge and continue to recognize these sponsors is important to keep in mind as we go through the process. So for the skate park, because it is significantly different in cost, I started at a $50,000 level of sponsorship, $15,000, $10,000, $5,000, and then because I did have interest from members of the community of a maintenance sponsorship, something where they would contribute to maintaining the park, and how would they get recognition for that. So for this particular one, I think what I'll do is I'll go through briefly of each one, and then we can go through each element if that is acceptable to the council. If you want to go that way, okay. So start off with the $50,000 for the skate park. Thought a good idea. Well, if you're going to give that much, then you can name that piece of the park, not the whole park, but that piece. A permanent sign at the entrance to the skate park with the donor name, logo. Acknowledgement sign would be relocated if the park is relocated. Having the donor's name and the logo on the city's website, we thought, limited time, so it wouldn't be forever. 7 years is a number that we threw out there. And of course, everybody who would donate would be listed in newsletter, the TV scroll that we have, and probably an ad in the Sentinel, and those traditional forms of recognition that you see. The next level, jump down to, was $15,000. Again, that would be a sign at the park, at the entrance to the skate park element, and your name would be listed along with other donors, so it would be a large sign. Sign would be relocated as well if the park were to move. Again, listing in the website and newsletter scroll in the traditional forms. The next level, 10,000, brings it down another notch. So each one, as you decrease. A sign on the fence that would surround the park with their logo, their name. Again, and then the traditional recognition newsletter and scroll. The 5,000 park bench with the bronze plaque, and you'll see as we go through this, I have this one as a bit higher because some of the bench would be a different type of bench than you would see in the dog park or the bike park, because you'd want the element that they could skate on, right? And that's going to be a more expensive type of bench. And then the sponsorship, I put down $3,000 annually, and that would get you a fence sign around the perimeter of the park. It's very similar. Each one, I really kept the same sort of elements, but the price is just different. So for the bike park, because the estimates for the bike park that I received from various vendors could be anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000 to implement a really good bike park. And then the same sort of elements of the naming rights, signs to the entrance, the park bench and so forth, and then the maintenance sponsorship. And I just decreased the level given the type of, with the bike park and the cost associated. So 25, 10, 5, and 3, and then a sponsorship of $2,000 to maintain. And then on the dog park, again, very similar, but because it's significantly less in cost, I dropped it quite a bit more. So same thing to name the dog park, the standalone sign on the website. I put down $10,000. then it decreases to $5,000, $3,000 for the park bench and the plaque, and then sponsorship of $1,000 annually. Now, if you'd like to go through each one or a generalized program, I'm going to leave that. You guys can determine how you would like to approach that discussion. But I think this gives us a framework which to operate in, and refine it from there.
Okay. Yeah, Dennis?
Lisa, I understand the skateboard park would be in a higher fee because of the cost of putting it in. I don't quite understand the difference in cost between a bike park and dog park. Dog parks take quite a bit of maintenance. I mean, it's a maintenance issue with a problem like that. So I feel maybe those two should be the same. I mean, it's, you know, you're going to have a lot of interest in both of those.
There is quite a bit of interest. I did talk to a couple of bike shop owners who felt that those numbers were, that was a good range. And the dog park folks that I did talk to, I'm sure they would be happy to adjust, but they were, you know, one of the things I was trying to center that around in terms of the dog park was there weren't as many business or corporate sponsorships that could afford that level, and that's why there's such a significant break in cost between those two.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question? Yes, Ed.
Quick question, just clarification. If you name the park, is the name forever and just on the website for 7 years, or is it only for 7 years no matter what you do?
No, I think that, well, the intent, again, it's completely flexible, but the intent was that if you were going to give $50,000 to the building it, then that naming right would be yours forever for that element, but that we just wouldn't necessarily keep it on our website forever.
Okay, so the park doesn't change,
No.
just drops off the website after 7.
Right.
Thank you.
One more question, Sam.
Sure.
Can this apply to commercial too? In other words, can McDonald's own the skateboard park?
Can they own it? They
Oh,
can't.
I mean, the name. Can they own the name?
Could they name it?
Yes.
Certainly.
Or is this only, okay,
Why not?
okay,
Staples.
okay.
Well, which I
think-
think leads into a question I have about whether we're reserving the right to reject any particular corporate sponsor, or because I think there would be some sponsors that would not be appropriate for the target audience, particularly for the skate park and the bike. You know, so I think it needs to be clear when we put this out that we reserve the right, you know, to reject any particular.
Great point. Great point.
You will recall, actually, that we addressed this issue in our donor policy.
Yes,
The city recently
that's
adopted,
right.
and
Okay.
we confronted
That's
this
right,
issue because
yeah.
I think, you know, it's very clear that if Philip Morris, for example, wanted to sponsor the skate park, that would be absolutely inappropriate in this case.
Right.
Right. I think we definitely would take that element, he's correct, and incorporate it
right.
into whatever program we develop.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. That sounds good. Any other questions?
Beautiful work.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Oh.
I'll just quickly, is there any member of the public that would like to address the council on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for council. Yes, Stephanie.
Well, considering the signs, we did talk about that a little bit in the Sanctuary Interagency Task Force for the Sanctuary Scenic Trail, that if we didn't get funds otherwise for some trail elements, would we go to corporate sponsors? And we talked about that very seriously. And we said, yeah, and Chevron's going to come to us because, you know, they sponsor a lot of environmental things. Yeah. And we said, well, we'll let them, but we'll just be a small sign, just a really small, tiny logo maybe. We never did develop the guidelines, and we never did get that far. But it's something to keep in mind here also. And we need to take a look at our sign ordinance. This does not meet our sign ordinance at all. So we need to look at that ordinance and amend it to say this is the rules except for parks or whatever. But we need to just kind of look at that because we don't usually allow these.
It is our sign ordinance.
That's right. That's right. But I mean, we need to be somewhat consistent and not break our own rules and tell everybody else you can't have 10 signs and you just put 10 signs over there.
We do that all the time.
Well, I did include this in the Planning Commission packet, but now that I have this element, you know, I'll definitely, if this is approved, include that.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot in the village. It's all over the village. You know, like signposts and bricks. They all have individual signs on them. We sell light posts. We sell whatever we can sell down there.
I'm
not like
sure
it's
the
new.
planning commission will probably chime in and say, well, the signs have to be of an appropriate size and not be lit and, things like that.
Okay. And I'll be sure to be more
not like-
specific, particularly with the fence signs, which you'll see that quite often, say in a Little League baseball field,
Yeah.
and they'll have sponsorship signs that they sell.
Right.
And also, if we have an opportunity for more benches just for people to sit on, people really like those, and they're real popular, and so we might try to think about having a few more benches for people sitting. And the Memorial Bench program was so successful, and people like that.
Totally. Well, is there design picnic tables in the area? Is there a key?
I don't have that included in the plans currently. I think if we have the opportunity through the fundings, that we'd be able to include that. There is
We could
a
sell
seating
tables
area.
then.
Yeah.
Can't we sell tables with a plaque on them?
We have
Sell
a
anything.
spotty record for putting tables in remote areas. I'm thinking benches are probably as far as we want to go.
Well, I tell you, families
How
are
about I
going
don't
to go
like
over
them?
there.
How about I
They're
don't
going
like
to go
them?
over there, and they got one kid skateboarding, the other one's, you got the dog running on the other one, so.
There's a seating node area that's central to the park, where it's in the middle between all three areas, which would definitely make for a nice location for a picnic table or a park bench. It's sort of an interactive area that we're looking to develop in there, and that's in the plans.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion with a slight modification to the past restored.
Please, go
Is
ahead.
that we accept staff report with a minor change where we make the bike program the same as the dog program.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
I have a question on that. I heard that we went to a bike expert, and they said that our bike, if anything, we should bring up the dog program as far as maintenance to be the same as the bike. Not lower the bike.
That's what I'm
to go-
suggesting.
Okay, so you
All
want to
right,
see the
just
dog
the maintenance
park.
portion.
Okay. The
All right.
dog park would be the same sponsorship levels as the bike park.
No, just the maintenance portion.
Oh, just the maintenance.
Just the
Maintenance,
maintenance.
that's 2,000 from 1,000.
Is that your intention,
Hold on.
Dennis?
Dennis, you
No,
wanna
I
clarify?
just thought that make this thing real simple for staff, everyone, just make bike and the dog just the same.
Well, no, the dog's going to take a lot less money to do than the bikes. The pump track's going to take more money to build.
Yeah.
So the bronze and gold and all that should be higher. But the maintenance, I have to agree with you, it could be
Okay,
a
then
maintenance.
then the 25 and the
thousand.
and the 30 stay the same.
Yeah,
the
just
30 now?
just the maintenance sponsorship changes to, what is the bike maintenance,
We have a higher
3,000?
fee on the
So the bike maintenance, I have 2,000, and the maintenance for the dog park, 1,000, which, either one of those could be adjusted just fine.
So they can both be at 2,000.
Sure.
I just think 10,000 is way too low for that dog park. You got fencing constantly to be repaired.
It's a fence.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's for the initial build. That's
All
not
right.
for the maintenance.
Okay. All right. I'm good.
Let's see how big these
Okay.
dogs are.
So we have a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
I'll second.
With one modification, that the maintenance sponsorship for the dog park will be raised to $2,000 annually. And Mike, you seconding that motion? Any further discussion?
Just to look for other opportunities for benches, if possible.
Yeah.
We'll know more, actually, when it gets
Table.
built, to see.
Yeah.
That's what they say. You'll know where people are going to walk, you know where people are going to ride, they're going to go where they want to go, whether there's a pathway there or not. And but this is a good project.
Okay. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Which brings us to item D, as in dog park, which is to consider a resolution amending the fiscal year 2013-14 Capitola fee schedule to incorporate the 2013-14 Animal Services Authority fee schedule, green energy incentive fees, and the village sidewalk signs fee. Is there a staff report?
Mr. Mayor, I have a relatively brief presentation on this. This is simply an administrative cleanup behind 3 different actions your council took over the last several months. It includes the formal amendment to the fee schedule to incorporate the Green Energy Incentive Program, where we drop the fees for certain types of carbon-reducing type projects to 0, the reduction in the village sidewalk sign fee rate, and as well incorporating the animal service control fees as a result of the new contract we have with the JPA into our fee schedule. Fee schedule amendments require specific noticing as well as a public hearing. That's all we're doing tonight. So these are changes that the council has previously seen and commented on.
Yeah. Dennis, do you have a question?
Is electric vehicle charging permits, weren't they part of the green incentive we're doing?
That's what it says in the first page. That's true, isn't it? All electric vehicle charging permits are zero now.
They're still on page 69 as of...
Yeah, I know. Is that the old one? Then you mentioned that to me earlier, Dennis, and
Yeah.
I hadn't seen that.
It's on page 69.
Green energy incentive is zero on the front page, but it's still showing as a fee for tier 1, 2, and 3 charging stations.
Unfortunately, I'm having a little bit of trouble catching what page that is shown on.
Okay, so in your resolution number, it's 3964 or 7957.
It's part of the spreadsheet listing of all the fees.
Page 7, if you count them out.
7. So I'm looking at this resolution approving it. That was the previously.
If you look at page 69 of the resolution, it's listed as page 69 on the bottom, Exhibit A. Get it yet?
I'm sorry, I'm looking through here, and I'm seeing that the green energy incentive fees are set at 0 in the resolution.
Yes, but the spreadsheet on Exhibit A,
Want me to give it to him?
Yeah, this is not the photovoltaic part. This is the...
yes, the vehicle charging, level 1, 2, and 3 is $100, $150, and $200. At the it starts with the evaluation for
So
residences, for
these are
building
the
permits.
these are the previously approved
Okay.
rates that are sort of this was the previously attached. So what we'd be doing is amending this document and setting the incentive, setting it to 0. So what this is, Exhibit A is showing you the previously approved fee schedule, and then you got to get to Exhibit B, which has the resolution. I'm looking at the page 83 in your packet, and it says that under community development fees, there shall be added the green energy incentive program fees at 0.
Yeah, but what does that mean? It doesn't define out what it is.
Yeah, I understand that the potential confusion. I can assure you that the green energy incentive program fees apply to the hot water, the solar panels, as well as the charging stations as well.
All 3 tiers of charging.
Yeah. So when we do the next fee schedule complete overhaul, you'll see those fall away out of the fee schedule. Thank you.
Did we
Sorry,
talk?
it took me a second to get to.
Did we talk about the fees for gray water programs and adding that into that also? Because that would be good to add that in there to have a break on whatever those fees are. I don't know for what kind of permit that requires.
I'm not aware offhand that there's a specific city permit. It would normally come out through the building program, what the gray water fees would be. That
we can look into it.
Or maybe someone putting in
I don't think we have a gray water.
No, we don't.
You can't get one.
No, but we can get there's a rainwater retention permit. We need to look at that also, where they put a cistern in.
Yeah, because you can get a rebate through Soquel Creek Water District for having a gray water program. So we need to add that into our system so that people can take advantage of that.
Well, this needs some discussion because it works fine in rural areas where you have larger lots. You do not want to put gray water systems in the village. You do not want to put them in Riverview Terrace, but.
Yeah, but there's bigger lots on the North 40s.
There you go.
And in Cliffwood Heights and in the Beulah Tract, and there's some other areas, have some nice flat land. Of course, I was thinking about what Bruce said. Our soil over there is clay. It's real hard, and I wonder how much percolation we get. I just put in permeable pavers, which we should also require. And it'd be interesting to see. I'm curious about that test at the Polo Grounds.
Our experiences with building in Capitola, you're on marine terraces everywhere. So you go down 18 inches and you're going to hit a hard pan. And that's why we have surface percolation. Cliffwood Heights is horrible. And I think your neighborhood has it and the avenues have it. And so you don't want to put a gray water system in those. So it has to be defined, I think, where that we're allowed to put them. So.
Council, let me offer a suggestion that we will be coming back with a climate action plan as one of the follow-ups to the general plan, and that'll include a lot of these kinds of programs and policies, and we were able to put this in place relatively easily. We'll look and see whether there's some simple fee schedules, fee amendments we could do to incentivize, whether it's gray water, whether it's rainwater catchment. I don't want to sort of continually load up too much near-term work on the planning department, but if there are some near-term things that we can do that are relatively simple, we'll bring them back. Otherwise, we'll be looking at it in our climate action plan.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, Jamie. Is there any member of the public that would like to address the council on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for council action. Is there a motion?
Move approval?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Which brings us to item E, which is to consider a resolution allowing the City of Capitola to accept ownership of quitclaims of 2 small parcels pending approval from the successor agency Oversight Board and the California Department of Finance. These are parcels that are actually left over from the old redevelopment agency, and we're considering whether or not to take ownership of them. Jamie, you want to give the staff report?
Mr. Mayor, I have a relatively short presentation, and while I was just accused of being tech-savvy, I think there's a time when being tech-savvy entails simply knowing your own limits, and in this case, I am moving computers to adapt to our changing environment here. So you'll recall that the city recently submitted a long-range property management plan to the Department of Finance as required under state redevelopment dissolution law. That was rejected. It turned out the state hired a contractor who went through some property records, and it turns out, unbeknownst to current city staff, the redevelopment agency actually did own 2 parcels of land within the city. One on Axford and Summerfield and one on 38th and Bromer. So the long-range property management plan has to talk about how we're going to dispose of all the different properties that the redevelopment agency owned. And what we are proposing is that the redevelopment agency quitclaim the property and the city accept title to the property as they're at this point used for roadway and sidewalk use. We would submit that a long-range property management plan to our oversight board for approval and then back again to the Department of Finance. So at this point, what we're recommending the City Council do is accept the quitclaim of the property pending everyone else's sort of certification of the overall plan. These 2 parcels of property, this is just to the west of the mall. That's the little cut through, I believe. So it's a small parcel, about 5,700 square feet, and it's really part of the road there on Axford and the sidewalk.
But we went through that when we were talking about the Target light, weren't we?
Yes, exactly.
And the cut through and, yeah, that this was identified.
In fact, staff identified this during our last housing element as a potential affordable housing site. That was intended to be humorous. We were looking at every parcel in the city potentially, and we noticed that this one was, was a funny one. And then in addition, we have a redevelopment agency on this one's even smaller. It's 653 square feet, and this is a residual that was left over from an RDA Habitat for Humanity project there on 38th Avenue. So the recommendation to your council tonight is to adopt the resolution, which would basically be accepting title to these properties pending everyone else's approval.
How do you think the state would respond if we gave them to them?
I don't think, the long-range property management plan has to entail sort of how we're going to dispose of it, and deeding it to the Department of Finance isn't on the list of things we can do.
We can make them maintain it, can't we?
Yeah, that parcel, it looks like it encroaches in onto private property, or what's assumed to be private property. Do these residents, are they aware of this?
Keep in mind that this is a GIS over an air photo, and often these lines aren't sort of survey quality. So my supposition is that that little box is probably shifted west by about 5 feet. That's just a guess, but often in the case when you overlay the parcel lines on top of the air photos, you'll see that sort of thing. And I'll bet you it lays out pretty nicely on the sidewalk.
Do we want it, or do we want to try to give it to that property owner if they want it?
My recommendation would be it's part of our sidewalk, and to be sort of contiguous with the rest of the sidewalk and the right-of-way is that we would maintain it in city ownership.
But it looks like some of it has landscaping on it, which on their side. So I guess we have to take a closer look at it and see.
I did look at the map that was recorded that created, this is a remainder from the Habitat for Humanity's project, and it is strictly the sidewalk.
Okay.
So that map's kind of not
I was gonna say,
completely accurate.
If it's landscaping, we should give the landscaping to them, because they're going to want to maintain it and not call us for that. That's right across from that big water retention basin that we never get a chance to look at from the air that's should be filled with water this time of year.
How about making that a skateboard park?
We talked about that.
We did,
Yeah.
yeah.
Affordable housing.
We were worried that it would be too wet.
Yeah. We had some neighbors, I think, that might object to that.
Oh, you think?
Well, Are there members of the public that would like to address the council on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the microphone and bring it back for discussion and action.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Is there a second? As the motion is second to accept the staff recommendation, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Which now brings us to the catch-up item from the consent agenda, which is item D, which is to consider ordinance amending Chapter 10.36.00055 of the Capitola Municipal Code, amending parking meter Zone B, second reading, and adopt the resolution authorizing submittal of amendments to the local coastal program to the Coastal Commission. Steve?
Good evening, Council. So this item is a second reading of an ordinance just to put the new parking lot in the Lower Pacific Cove into Zone B so that when we open it, we can charge the 50 cents per hour parking fee that we charge in the upper lot. And the resolution is just so we can file an application to change the LCP amendment with the Coastal Commission.
Dennis, you have...
Yeah, I brought this up, and I have no problem with the resolution. That's fine with me. I would like to continue a discussion of the temporary Lower Pacific Cove parking lot, in that we never made a decision how we would operate and use this lot, whether it would be closed at times or whether, 75% of the time it's not needed, whether we close it down or leave it open and make that the only lot open or otherwise. But I think we need to bring that back for council discussion before this lot's open, so it's clear direction to staff of how we would like to deal with it.
I suggest that we start by seeing how it's going to be utilized, and I agree with you, there may be times when the lower lot's the only one that gets used.
Well, one way or the other, it doesn't make sense for us to have parking lots open that are barely being used when we can utilize one. It minimizes maintenance, and also with staff time to control and police those areas. So I just think we need to bring it back as a council discussion because we did continue that without a decision before.
Okay, so it looks like direction to staff to bring back before the lot is completed and open some operational guidelines for council consideration. Anything else, Dennis?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll move the resolution here.
Second.
Is there any member of the public who wants to address us? Seeing none, I will close the microphone and bring it back. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. That brings us to the end of our council meeting. I will adjourn the council meeting to the special budget session, which will be held on Thursday, February 20th, 2014 at 7 p.m. in these council chambers. I will now move us and open the City of Capitola as the successor agency to the former Capitola Redevelopment Agency, and we'll start with a roll call.
Members Harlan,
Here.
Norton,
Here.
Bodorf,
Here.
Termini,
Here.
and Chair Story.
Here. Next we'll have oral communications. Are there members of the public that would like to address the successor agency? Seeing none, I will close the oral communications or public comments. I skipped over additions and deletions to the agenda. It appears that we do not have any. Are there staff comments? Seeing none, will take us to the consent calendar. Is there anyone that wants to pull a consent item?
I'll move the consent calendar.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously, which brings us to the regular agenda item 4A, which is the consider approval of the recognized obligation payment schedule for the period July 1, 2014 to December 31st, 2014. This is what we affectionately refer to as the ROPS. So,
Good evening, Mayor, Council. This is the ROPS for July 1 to December 31st of 2014, and this ROPS includes the fifth accelerated payment on the library obligation, which is $425,000. This will bring the library to be fully funded within $30,000 in the next fiscal year. And it also includes the regular payments for the Housing Authority as well as the Millennium Project. There is a reduction in the administrative allowance. Previously, we have been putting in $125,000 every 6 months, and it has been reduced to $75,000 to reflect what we estimate staffing time and expenditures for in the next first part of the next fiscal year.
Other questions? Comments? Any member of the public wish to address the council? Or actually, this is the Oversight Successor Agency. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council for deliberation and action.
Move approval?
Second?
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And the motion passes unanimously. With that, I'll adjourn this meeting of the Capitola Successor Agency to a future date and time to be determined. Which brings us to the end of our council meeting this evening. Thank you, everyone who participated, council members and everyone at home who watched. And good night, Capitola.
Why have you brought me here?
Do you remember a boy called Silas Whitaker? Mrs. Massey?
After all these years? Yes. Articulation disorder. W's for R's. Quite straightforward.
He was squatting here with Jessica. How was it that you came to be working at Boxgrove?
It was my field before I married. Speech therapy. I came to Boxgrove as an act of contrition.